you.
Have you ever had a moment in your life where like there was something and you were like, this is going to change everything for me? Like this moment is going to change everything. I've had at least a good handful of those moments for sure, but there's one person in particular that I think of when I think of a moment that was going to change my life. And her name was Mary Beth Anderson. She was my crush in the 4th grade. Yeah, you can give it up for my crush in the 4th grade. That's weird. So, literally, first girl I ever liked besides the Pink Ranger, Kimberly Jo Johnson. She's a total babe, right? Like, 100% my first crush. But first real person crush, Mary Beth Anderson. So, I tried to tell her a lot. But see, the thing is, I was always a little weird about talking to girls. I was always really nervous. I'm like, do they want me to talk to them? Especially because my mom thought it would be really cool for me to have a mullet. So up until the very last day of 4th grade, literally the last day of school, we ain't got it cut before that, I had business in the front, party in the back. But it wasn't like even like a short mullet, which I don't think that makes it any cooler. It literally was like down to halfway on my back. Yeah. I didn't even bring a picture because you'd literally boo me off the stage. So I was a little nervous to talk to girls, and this was like the first one that I'm like, I want to tell her I like her. But again, I was really nervous, and I tried to do like a couple things. Like there would be times where like I would like try to leave class at the exact same time as she did, and like try to walk out and go, I like you. But then like, I always got a little nervous, and then it would just kind of like, and so then it just makes it even weirder that I'm like kind of whispering things under my breath while staring at her. It made it really uncomfortable. So finally, I thought of this story because of Valentine's Day. Valentine's Day was coming up, and it was 4th grade, and I was like, you know what? This is the time. This is when I'm making my move. And so, yeah, thank you, gentlemen that are very supportive in the front. So I was getting, everyone 4th grade, you get like those little Valentines. They kind of fold open. They're not a big deal. You have a little piece of candy. You give it to everyone. It literally means nothing. Sorry if you got some of those. But I told my mom, there's a girl in my class, and I really like her. And she says, ooh, and instantly goes, we need to get her a card. And I'm like, that's exactly what I want, Mom. I want a card. So she goes to the store. Again, because I'm 4th grade, she literally went to the store and bought it for me. How lame is that? She comes back with this card of the Tasmanian Devil. It opened up, Tasmanian, everyone knows what Taz is, right? I'm not too old for that. Yeah, spinny guy, he's brown, and he spins like a tornado. Anyways, he literally says, I'm crazy for you, and had big hearts, and then in the corner of it, I wrote, I like you, Niko. Took it, yeah. I was hitting those words hard. So I take this card to school, give out all my normal Valentines, and then as soon as I see her go to the bathroom, I sneak up to her desk, slide that card right on in her desk. Yeah, first time sliding in someone's DMs, no big deal. So I pass this card to her, and then I'm waiting. Because she's in the bathroom. I don't know if she's taking number 1. I don't know if she's taking number 2. All I know, girl's in there for a while. Finally, she comes back out, but then she beelines it right to her desk. Like, this couldn't have been more perfect. So she goes straight to her desk, pulls out this card, and instantly I'm like, oh my gosh, I thought I was going to have to wait around before she found it, finds it, opens it, and I kind of see her smirk. And I'm like, okay, all right, I like it. That seems like a good sign. Girl smirking, pulls over one of her friends and kind of shows it to them. They both start giggling. And I'm instantly like, uh-oh, is this good? Is this not good? I don't know. I don't talk to girls. I don't know, like, is it good? I like it when girls laugh at me. Maybe this is good. So, like, slowly, one by one, all the different girls in class come together. They're all circled up. And finally, the last one walks, and the whole time, there's, like, this weird kind of, like, pillar in the middle of class. And I'm, like, trying to be, like, all sneaky, like, trying to look around it. Finally, the last girl walks up. And I remember, I will never forget this moment in all of my life. She walks up, and, like, Mary Beth shows her and goes, what? And she goes, oh my gosh, are you gonna like date Niko? And she turns it and without missing a beat goes, ew, no, he looks like a girl. It's all right. I'm okay, I got an amazing wife. So, All that to say is sometimes we have moments that we think are going to change everything in our lives, but then all of a sudden they don't. Or maybe they don't turn out the way that we thought. And maybe your story is not, hopefully, is that someone thought you were a girl and you're a dude. But we have all had moments like that where you thought it was going to go one way, and instead it went another way. This happens to us all the time in life. Sometimes it happens in school. Sometimes it happens like during a game or during maybe a band that you're a part of. Maybe it's like when you're at home, like you thought there's finally going to be this moment that was going to change everything for your house, and it didn't happen. But today, specifically, I want to look at what it can kind of look like when it comes to our faith. When we have this moment in our faith journey where we think it changes everything, and then all of a sudden it kind of feels like it didn't really change anything. But I know with a room this big, there are people all across the board on where you're at right now with your faith. Like maybe some of you kind of started following Jesus when you were younger, or maybe even earlier this year, and like you remember at first like being so filled with excitement, and you were like, couldn't wait for like that next like time you're gonna get your youth group or whatever else. But then slowly that excitement kind of started to fade away. Or maybe like you even felt different at first, but now kind of like your life kind of feels the same. It kind of feels like you're kind of, I'm kind of like all the rest of my friends, except, I have to go to life group on Wednesday, or maybe you go to, church on Sundays. And maybe you're even wondering like, man, like, did this whole Jesus thing, like, did it even take? Am I doing something wrong? Or maybe for some of you, you started following Jesus, and then like instantly you're like, all right, I guess I got to stop doing like the bad things. So you instantly went to like that list of like the big things that you're not supposed to do. So you're like, all right, not going to start drinking, not going to keep drinking, not going to keep partying. I'm going to, stop doing drugs. Or maybe it's like you had certain friends, you're like, I can't be around them anymore. I'm going to stop being around them. They're my bad idea friends. They're always going to, kind of bring me down. Maybe for some of you, it's like, your words, like you were like, I'm going to stop cussing. I'm going to stop doing that. Or maybe for some of you, it's like things that you look at online, whether it's porn or other things, and you're like, I'm going to stop doing all those things. But you kind of got to the end of like all these things you're cutting out, and you kind of realize that you still feel the same. Or like maybe even worse, maybe you even feel bored. Like you kind of felt like everyone else is out doing all these amazing, awesome things, having fun, and all of a sudden like your life just kind of feels like it has a lot more rules in it. And you can't really do a lot of things that you maybe want to even do. Or maybe you're here, and like this is your very first time at a church thing. Or maybe you're like me and your parents or your boyfriend, your girlfriend forced you to be here. Or maybe they even forced you to like show up on like Sundays or like Wednesdays for your life group, but you're not really feeling it. You don't really like doing it, but you just go because it's just, you don't want to argue. Or maybe you're even here and you're kind of like, man, all these people are a little fake. Like they don't feel like they're any different than I am. And at the end of the day, you're almost like, yeah, all these people kind of just feel like hypocrites a little bit. Well, I want you to know that no matter where you land right now with your faith journey, with all of this, like I am so glad that you're here. I know all your leaders are so glad that you guys are here. And I already believe, because I heard Micah teach last night, I already know God's doing some amazing things this weekend. I know it's going to continue to happen through this weekend. And so I want to jump right back into like the story of Joseph. So Micah kind of gave us like an overview of his story, but I want to specifically zone in on one part. So this is right after his brothers, beat him up and sold him into slavery. Great day. So we're going to pick up Genesis chapter 39, verses 1 and 2. So it says, when Joseph had been taken down to Egypt, Potiphar, Pharaoh's chief officer, the commander of the royal guard, and an Egyptian, purchased him from the Ishmaelites who had brought him down there. The Lord was with Joseph. So Joseph is bought by this guy who's kind of like a really big deal in that area, right? And then there's this phrase that I love that we're going to see a couple times today. It says, the Lord was with Joseph. Because I don't know about you guys, like if I'm looking at Joseph's life right now from like the outside, that literally sounds insane. Like it feels like God kind of more than anything else abandoned Joseph, right? Like Joseph went from like living the good life to his brothers beating him up, faking his death, and selling him into slavery. I would have to admit that that's probably not my best day if that happens. And, I'm sure that was not ever going to be Joseph's best day. And he even probably had to spend like a couple days, if not a couple weeks, either in a cage, hooked up, as a slave, going to this new city. And I'm sure that Joseph probably isn't feeling real great about his life right now. And if I was him, I'd be saying, like, this isn't how my life was supposed to be. Like, this is not how things were supposed to play out. And we've all been there, where we're going through something hard, or maybe we're in a place where everything was working really well, and all of a sudden one thing changed, and it felt like our whole life kind of got derailed. And we're instantly go to like, God, why are you doing this to me? Or maybe we even think that God can't use the pain that we're in right now. But I want you to know that God can always use your pain. God has bigger plans for our life than the moment that we can see right now. And he has bigger plans for Joseph. So let's keep checking out his story. He continues next and says, his master saw that the Lord was with him. There's that phrase again. And that the Lord made everything he did successful. Potiphar thought highly of Joseph, and Joseph became his assistant. He appointed Joseph head of his household and put everything he had under Joseph's supervision. And from the time he appointed Joseph head of his household and of everything he had, the Lord blessed the Egyptian's household because of Joseph. The Lord had blessed everything he had, both in the household and in the field. So he handed over everything he had to Joseph and didn't pay attention to anything except the food that he ate. And we got that very famous line, now Joseph was well built and handsome. So even after everything that Joseph had been through, like, dude is still putting in work, right? Like, he is still working hard. In fact, he is doing such a good job as a slave, he literally gets to run the house. Like, talk about a glow up. Like, literally started from the bottom, now he's here. That's Joseph's story right now. And he just went from, like, being a slave to being the head of this household. Like, getting to run, and that means he probably had multiple people who were coming to him, and he was laying down the orders of what was going to happen. They were going to do whatever he told them to do. But I will say that in that passage, there is one line that always throws me, and I still, even as a grown man, don't understand it, where it says, like, his boss trusts him with everything and didn't pay attention to anything except the food that he ate. Like, isn't that kind of weird? Like, what was bro eating that this guy was so concerned? Like, was Joseph coming back with, like, White Castles and just, like, clogging the toilet every night? I don't know. All I'm saying, that's weird. We're going to keep going. Either way, it would have been easy for him to be mad about the circumstances because of how hard they are, right? But we've all been there where someone is making us do something we don't want to do, where we feel like we've been cheated, and then all of a sudden we don't try as hard, right? Like, I can't even tell you how many times as a kid growing up where my parents would make me clean my room, and I did it the slowest possible way. It could be like 5 shirts on the ground, and it took me 30 minutes to get those 5 shirts because I was like, I can't believe Mom getting me to do this. Doing it as slow as I can, and I throw it at the laundry basket. I totally missed, and now I got to clean it up again. So all that I'm saying is we've all been there where we're so mad, and we will have to keep going anyways. Let's keep going in Joseph's story. Sometime later, his master's wife became attracted to Joseph and said, sleep with me. He refused and said to his master's wife, with me here, my master doesn't pay attention to anything in his household. He's put everything he has under my supervision. No one is greater than I am in this household. And he hasn't denied me anything except for you. Makes sense, since you are his wife. How could I do this terrible thing and sin against God? So apparently this guy's wife was like, grabbing on Joseph's arm going, oh, you a man. Like, I like what I'm seeing right now. And like in a really pretty forward way says, hey, sleep with me, Joseph. And Joseph instantly claps back with like this huge humble brag. Like, that's the only way you can describe this. He says, hey, your husband fully trusts me because of how I live and how I work. When no one is greater than me in this household, which is kind of weird to say to the woman in the house, but that's another thing. And then, of course, he denies her when, like, a lot of people would have been like, yes, maybe, like, would have fallen into that trap. He's like, girl, thank you, next. I'm going to keep moving on. I didn't know I was going to get a reaction to thank you, next. Okay. So, I want to read the next part. One day, when Joseph arrived at his house to do work, none of the household's men were there. She grabbed his garment, saying, lie down with me, but he left his garment in her hands and ran outside. So one day, Joseph shows up, no one else is there, and literally she rips off his clothes. And dude is, so about doing the right thing when you might think, I don't know, maybe I want to at least grab like a little mini tunic or like a Speedo kind of thing. He literally just runs out butt naked. And then afterwards, she starts lying to everyone else, saying that he tried to force himself on her. So needless to say, when the big man, the boss got home, he was not very happy. Here's this last part. Joseph's master took him and threw him in jail, the place where the king's prisoners were held. While he was in jail, the Lord was with Joseph and remained loyal to him. He caused the jail's commander to think highly of Joseph. The jail's commander put all of the prisoners in jail under Joseph's supervision, and it was the one who determined everything that happened there. The jail's commander paid no attention to anything under Joseph's supervision because the Lord was with him and made everything he did successful. So Joseph is in prison, and he is still hustling. Like, he is still living differently than everyone else around him. Like, he is in prison. This is like the one place that you literally don't have to do anything besides just sit in a room. And he is still finding ways to live his life differently. He gets put in prison, and again, because of how he's living, and he is trusted, he's put in charge of everything. Like, I don't even know how you do that when you're just sitting in a cell all day. But my question when I read this is like, how does this keep happening to Joseph? Every time he's in a bad situation, all of a sudden he's almost the leader of those situations just by the way that he's living. Like, what is he doing that's making him stand out so much? Like, how is he living his life and the way that he's living it so much different than everyone else around him? Well, I think that Joseph knew a deeper truth that kind of helped him frame the rest of his life. I think that this truth kind of helped him to live differently than all the other people around him. And that because of this truth that he had, even when life was hard, even when life wasn't fair, which it was time and time again, he still pushed through. He was still able to live differently than the people around him. And I think that's the same truth that Jesus would be living in 1,000 years later. And so this truth that we're going to talk about, that I think Joseph knew and Jesus lived out, is found in Luke 3:22. But before I get there, I want to set you guys up a little bit for this passage. Because I think every time we talk about Jesus, most of the time we think about most of the miracles that he's done and those things. We're going to do a story before all those things. So when you look at the life of Jesus, we have the Christmas story, right? They started the census, Mary, Joseph, donkey, took it, they do all that stuff. We know that story. You hear it every year. Then there's a big gap where we don't know anything about Jesus. We know one story where he's 12, and then there's this big, huge gap until the dude is 30 years old. That's a big time. And all those things that we think about when we think about Jesus, he hasn't done any of those things yet. When you think about all the amazing things that he said, the miracles that he did, the people that he's healed, the food that he created out of nowhere, none of those things have happened yet. And he's actually just about to start his ministry. He's, about to be baptized. He gets baptized, comes back out, and this is what happens. Luke chapter 3, verse 22. And the Holy Spirit in bodily form descended on him like a dove. And a voice from heaven said, "You are my dearly loved son, and you bring me great joy." And why this verse is so important is because even though Jesus hasn't done anything with his life up to this point, he had done no healings, he had done no miracles, he didn't even have a job that anybody would want. He was a carpenter. It would have been low paying, and literally it would have been one of the worst jobs. He's 30, he's still living with his parents. He's literally the first millennial to ever, he doesn't have a job. When you think of someone 30 with a crappy job, living with their parents, maybe in the basement, you're probably thinking of them playing video games all day. They got Cheetos down the front of their shirt. They got pit stains. It's a gross picture, right? And this is kind of what we're seeing as Jesus' life right now. He hasn't done anything that we would be praising him for up until this moment. But what I love about it is that even in that moment, before he's done anything, God still loves him. And I fully believe that this is something that Jesus understood better than anyone else in human history. That this is something that he never forgot. That this is the thing that guided Jesus' entire ministry. Because if Jesus had forgotten this, he wouldn't have been able to live out his perfect life. He wouldn't have been able to live out the life that he was supposed to live. Because every person that Jesus ran into had a different idea of what they wanted him to do or what they, thought he should be doing at the time. So the Jewish people, God's people, had been waiting for this Messiah basically to come and save them. And Jesus was that Messiah, but they had waited generation after generation. And so, when you're waiting for something for a long time, sometimes, when I'm waiting for an hour, I'll make up crazy stories to try to get myself to stay focused. These people have been waiting for, some of them have, lived and died, and they still haven't seen this Messiah that they're waiting for. And so they are, they've had these things to kind of wait and anticipate him showing up. So they all had different ideas. The Pharisees, they were kind of like the religious leaders of the day. They wanted Jesus to be all about rules. They wanted Jesus to be all about, discussing, big things about God, but they didn't really care about, helping poor people. They didn't really care about people who had, diseases or, doing anything to help them. They didn't care about any of that kind of stuff. They just cared about Jesus talking about rules and, talking about God. They just wanted talk. And then there's other people, there's strangers and families who were, all around him, who, wanted him to, do miracles. They wanted him to, take care of, their hunger needs. They even wanted him basically to be, their personal genie, right? In their, dream scenario, it would have been Jesus was here, and you'd walk up and say, Jesus, I want this, 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 and this. And he's like, boom, boom, and, literally just made it appear. That is what they wanted. And even the disciples, these 12 guys who he spent the most time with while he was here on earth, even they didn't understand what Jesus was doing. They thought he was supposed to be this big political ruler. They thought it was going to be Jesus riding up in a tank, coming to take out the king and be like, hey, I'm the king now, and all my bros are the mini kings, princes. I don't know what that, whatever. But you're my right-hand guys. That's what they all are. And they literally thought Jesus was showing up to be this political ruler. But Jesus knew that his identity wasn't found in what those people thought. He knew that it wasn't found in what he did or in what he wore. He knew that his identity was that he was loved by God. So instead of changing himself for people, he was living his life as a response to God's love. He was loved, so he loved others. It was his natural response. Love changed Jesus. And what is awesome is that I fully believe that God loves each and every single one of us in that same way. And that we get to live in a place where we know that our true value and our identity comes from being loved by God. And like Joseph and like Jesus, we can live differently because of that. We get to be originals. God's love doesn't just change Jesus' life, God's love changes us. And so that means for every person here that if you're a Jesus follower, man, our lives should look different from the world around us, right? And that we get to live in different ways. And I think in specifically two ways. I think we get to live differently in both what we do and what we don't do. So our lives should look different because of what we don't do. Whether that's drinking or maybe what you go physically with your boyfriend or your girlfriend or maybe even things that we look at online. And these aren't random rules that someone just said, hey, we want to kind of ruin the fun. Let me just throw these out here. God's I just want to be an evil God and give you evil rules. No, these are things that God has put out there because he doesn't want to take something away from us. Instead, he wants something for us. He wants us to see the freedom that we really get when these things don't keep us up in chains, always looking for the next thing. Because all these things might satisfy for a little bit, but then you're always going to be looking for that next thing. You're always going to be looking for that next thing, and they never truly satisfy. And when we get into a place where that's all we focus on, man, like I said earlier, all of a sudden life starts to feel really boring, right? And all of a sudden kind of feels like there's no adventure, that there's nothing really happening. It's just hey, I'm just trying to not do a lot of things. And I'm 100% there because, to be honest, that is part of my story. I started following Jesus when I was a junior in high school. And, I remember at first being, so excited Like every day kind of waking up and like having like that tingly feeling, almost like, like you're in love. Like I remember waking up every day going like, oh my gosh, this is so exciting. Like I made this big life-changing decision. And like each day that it happened, it slowly kind of felt a little bit less strong. And like I remember at first, like I was like trying to read all these books, trying to understand more about like what I'm supposed to do. But the one thing I did know is like, oh, I'm definitely not supposed to like party. I'm not supposed to be doing all these things. So I started cutting out a whole bunch of things out of my life. And soon, after a couple months, I kind of was like, man, this is kind of just boring. This is like my life before, but less fun. And it wasn't until finally I had someone who said, hey, you know what you should do? You should actually start serving. At the time, I was a senior at this point. She said, you should actually start serving like in our kids ministry and be like a dancer on stage, which if you've ever seen me dance, literally no one would have ever asked me to do that. But I was like, I guess I'll give it a try. I guess I'll dance. I'm not good, but if you're so desperate, I'll try it. And what was amazing is that when I started, serving and doing that, all of a sudden, my heart started changing. All of a sudden, I started caring about it more. And even though the first day I probably should have been going, I'm just doing this to do this, I instantly saw like the impact of what it was doing when I was serving someone else, giving of my own time to serve other people. And it instantly made me want to find more ways to get that feeling. Like I feel like most of my journey has been like, all right, how can I serve other people? How can I find other ways where God is moving? Because that is how I've continued to keep growing as a Jesus follower. But as important as our lives should be in what we don't do, it's also important to be different in what we do, in what we should do. Yeah, like we get to live differently because of the love that we have in Jesus. And I wish for every single person in this room that I could tell you exactly what you need to do in like every situation from like here on out. But to be honest, like we don't have that kind of time. And I don't know, TBH, I'm really not that smart. You probably have to figure it out for yourself. But what I can tell you is that when we live differently, when we are different in what we do, that means a couple things. It means working hard at whatever you're doing. Like whether it's school, sports, clubs, all those different things, that you can be different in those things. And working hard, even if I literally ran cross country for 4 years and my only goal in every race was I wasn't the last person. Like I was not good. Even my senior year, there was a couple times I almost got last. So I'm just saying, you don't have to be the best at any of those sports, but like trying your best. Or like, even when it comes to school, like not saying like, hey, I'm just going to look at my friend's homework. I'm just going to cheat today. I'm going to do whatever to get done. No, but like saying, hey, I'm going to try to learn. Even if this isn't my best, even if I'm only going to get a C+, I tried really hard, saying like, I am going to honor God in this. I'm going to try my best and work as best as I can. That also means treating people different. Like looking at like the people like in our schools, in our homes, on our teams, and going, I'm not just going to treat them the way that I've always treated them. Instead, I want to be someone who is like building into them. I want to be someone who's encouraging. I want to be someone who is life-giving. Or like I want to find that kid at school that literally no one talks to. That like sits by themselves at lunch every day. And like go out and say, you know what, I am going to be with you. I'm going to hang out with you. I'm going to bring my friends around you. Because even if like you are a little weird and I don't even know if I always want to hang out with you, I am going to say, you know what, this isn't about me. This is about me being able to build into you and encourage you and give you life. And what different in what we do sometimes looks like standing up for something. And I think a big part of that is deciding to join God on his adventure that he's calling all of us to. Because if you look around and your life looks the same as all your non-Christian friends, like are you really living in the truth that you are loved by God and that's all you need? Because God's love changes us. And there's this verse in Matthew 5:16. I think it puts it so well. It says this: in the same way, let your light shine before people so they can see the good things that you do and praise your Father who is in heaven. There are people all around you, at your schools, on your teams, at your homes, people who are looking at you to see what Jesus is like, to see what this whole church thing is about. And with the way that you're living your life, The actions that you have, are they looking at you and thinking, yeah, that's something I want to be about. That's something I want to, make my life count. I want to do something like that. Or are they looking at your life going, I don't want anything about that. All they're doing is they just have to spend a couple more hours at church. They're just wasting their time. Or maybe worse, they're like, no. There is nothing about that life that I want. I'm actually trying to get away from Jesus because of the way that you're living. Our actions shape people's perception of Jesus. And what's beautiful about this is that even when we mess up, because you will, I promise, I mess up literally probably at least every hour. We all are going to mess up. But because we are still loved, we don't have to stand in our guilt or in our shame. Because so many of us, and I know in this room, besides this big, that there are so many of you right now who are stuck in your guilt and your shame. And you haven't really embraced the love that God has for you. And maybe it was something that you did that you still feel really bad about, or maybe it's something that someone did to you and you still haven't really felt better about it afterwards. I just want you to know that you don't have to stay there. That you can stand up and you can continue to follow after Jesus and the love that he has for us, because we know that's how life works best. Because he created us. He wired us. He knows us intimately better than anyone else. And so the thing that God is calling all of us to here today is an adventure. He's calling you to an adventure to live your life differently, the best way that you could, to live in true freedom. He's showing us a new way to be human. And don't let those lesser things in our lives define you. Maybe it's a sport that you're good at or not good at. Maybe it's your GPA. Maybe it's your hobbies. Maybe it's like what other people say about you, your parents, your friends, maybe even your haters. Maybe it's like maybe the things that you do or don't have. You guys, those things don't define you. Put those things away and let Jesus define you. That we can lean on those things and get those out and say, you know what? Those are lesser things, because when we make those the things that define us, they shape our actions, right? Like if we make sports our everything, guess what? All of our actions are like, how can I get better at this sport? Or if your grades are your everything, all of a sudden we're trying to change everything that we're doing to like make it so that we can get, straight A's or whatever else. Like all those things, when we make those our identity, they change our actions. But Jesus is saying, hey, follow me on this adventure. And when you do that, when you make him that center, when you say, you know what, basketball might be a part of what I do, but it's not my everything. My hobbies might be part of what I do, but it's not my everything. Jesus, I want your adventure. When you do that, it'll change how you live. It'll change how you act. And all of a sudden, you're going to start showing love to other people with your actions. And it's going to be because it's a natural response of every day when we know that we are loved by God, our natural response is to show love to other people. And when you do that, man, it makes it so your faith isn't just a camp thing that you're getting really excited about. It is like, this is my life, and you can live in this every single day. You guys, bow your heads with me. I just want to open this up and give you guys a chance to respond, to join God on that adventure that he's calling all of us to. Because I know some of you guys, you've never made that choice to follow Jesus with your life, to give him your everything, to say, hey, I don't have all the answers, but what I know is that you have the best life. And so even though I don't know everything yet, I want what you have. And so if that's you, I want you to pray here in just a moment these words. And then the other group of people I want to talk to here today, is everyone here who may be like, you've even maybe made this decision in the past, but man, life has gotten in the way. You feel like you're so far off from what God has called you to. And then you almost feel like you kind of need to almost re-up because you feel like your faith has kind of been clouded out by all these other things. And I just want you to know that God loves you, and you 100% can pray these words too. It's kind of like a reaffirmation of this is what I'm going to stand for. I may have messed up. I may be way far off the path, but God, I want to pick myself up. I want to follow after what you have. So if you are in either of those camps, you guys can pray these words with me. God, I found my identity in other things. And I'm asking forgiveness because I want to find my identity, find who I am in your love. I want you. I want what you have for me. And I'm definitely not perfect. But I want to follow you with my life. I want your adventure for my life. Amen. Hey, you guys, if real quick, and I can't even see to be honest, but like if you prayed that prayer, whether it was your first time ever praying a prayer like that, or maybe like you like wanted to re-up on like your faith, like could you just put your hands up real quick? So, because we just want to celebrate you guys. I see some hands up. Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah. Let's give it up. Like that is life change. That's why we're here. That's why things like this are happening. Well, guys, I can't even tell you how important it is when you get back to your life group here in a bit. Share that with them. Let them celebrate you and the decision that you made here today. Let me pray for us, and we're going to respond back to this band. Father, thank you so much for who you are. Thank you for your love. Thank you for the life change that we see here today. And we just want to respond back to you, the love that you have for us, as we just celebrate you and lift you up. In your name we pray. Amen.
Hey guys, thanks so much for watching our YouTube video. If you like what you saw, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe. You won't regret it.